I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd find myself in a situation like this, but there I was. Sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, trying to wrap my head around what I had just seen. It all started with a single message, no warning, no build-up, just a text that read, "You should be aware of your wife's activities." Attached was a photo that turned my world upside down. It was of my wife, laughing and leaning into a man I knew all too well, Daniel, my so-called friend. In the picture, they were sitting in a booth at a restaurant, her hand in his, and her body pressed against his thigh. My stomach dropped as I saw it. I wanted to brush it off, to tell myself it was nothing, a misunderstanding. But there was something about the way she looked at him, the ease with which they interacted, that felt off. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I scrolled through the phone, searching for clues, piecing together the things I had missed. Slowly, everything clicked: the late nights, her sudden interest in going out with the girls, the emotional and physical distance between us. My hand shook as the truth settled in. I had been blind, but not anymore. That evening, when she came home, she acted like nothing was wrong. Smiling, making small talk about her day, like nothing had changed. I couldn't hold it in. I showed her the picture and the text. She stared at it for a moment, her face going from shock to anger in an instant. "Are you really going to believe this nonsense?" she snapped, her voice cold. I wanted to scream, but I forced myself to stay calm. I told her how all the pieces hadn't added up for weeks. I told her how I'd been feeling that something was wrong, but she dismissed me, turning it around to accuse me of being paranoid. For a second, I doubted myself. Maybe I was overreacting, but then I remembered the look in her eyes in that picture, a look she hadn't given me in months. When I demanded to see her phone, everything shifted. She gripped it tightly, her voice rising as she said, "This is exactly why our marriage is failing." She turned it all on me, trying to make me feel like the villain. And then I realized I wasn't just fighting her lies anymore. I was fighting her deflection, her attempt to make me the enemy. I couldn't look at her. Grabbing my keys, I walked out, slamming the door behind me as she called after me. I needed space, anything to clear my head. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She made coffee, talked about weekend plans. But when she mentioned a party at Lisa's on Saturday, I knew she was trying to bait me. "Daniel will be there," she said too quickly, watching me carefully. I clenched my jaw, nodding. If she thought I was going to let this slide, she was gravely mistaken. Saturday came, and stepping into that party felt like walking into enemy territory. The room buzzed with chatter and laughter, but I could feel eyes on me as soon as we entered. My wife played the perfect hostess, chatting and laughing, all the while drawing closer to Daniel, touching his arm, laughing at his jokes. Right in front of me. She wanted me to see it. She wanted to provoke a scene. But I refused to give her that satisfaction. I mingled, pretending to be unaffected, though inside, I was seething. Then, I overheard a whisper, "Have you heard about their situation? The poor guy doesn't even know the half of it." That was it. My breaking point. I put my drink down and made my way toward them. Conversations died as I approached. I didn't ease into it. I went straight for it. "Honestly, what the hell is this?" I asked, my voice harsh, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're actually doing this in front of everyone?" Her smile vanished. Panic flashed in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" she asked, trying to stay calm, but the fear in her eyes told me everything. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, pointing at Daniel. "You've been sneaking around with him. Lying to me. And now you're flaunting it in front of everyone." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My wife's expression hardened, and she moved closer to me, hissing, "Don't do this here." "You didn't care about doing it here when you were all over him," I snapped. Daniel stepped forward, trying to intervene. "Maybe you should leave," he said, glancing at me as though I was the one out of line. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let them humiliate me any longer. My blood was boiling. I clenched my fists. I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. You think you can stand there smug after everything you've done? Sneaking around with my wife? Making me look like a fool? Daniel faltered, his confidence wavering. My wife tried to interject, but I cut her off. This ends now, I growled. I didn't know how the night would end, but one thing was certain: I wasn't going to let them walk all over me any longer. Daniel turned to leave, but I wasn't done. He shoved me, just enough to make me stumble. That was all I needed. My fist collided with his jaw, and the room erupted in chaos. The sound of the punch rang through the air. He staggered back, knocking over a table. The fight was on. We collided with a couch, knocking over bottles, glasses. He swung at me, but I grabbed his collar, hitting him hard in the ribs again and again. When he pushed me off, he tried to get up. His face was flushed, his eyes wide. His nose was bleeding. He swung at me again, but this time, I caught his arm, twisted it behind his back, and slammed him face first into the coffee table. The glass shattered beneath him. He screamed as he collapsed to the floor, his face covered in blood. I stood above him, gasping for breath, my knuckles aching. The room had gone silent, except for Daniel's groans. My wife rushed to him, crying, shaking as she tried to stop the bleeding. "You're crazy," she yelled at me, but I didn't look at her. I looked down at Daniel, my voice shaky but firm. "You wanted to treat me like a fool? Like I was nothing? This is what you get." Daniel could only groan in response, his face battered. For the first time that night, I felt in control again. But the silence that followed felt heavier than the fight itself. Finally, my wife spoke. "Haven't you done enough?" She spat. I turned to her, incredulous. "After everything you've done, you think I'm the monster here?" She fell silent. Her lips parted, but I cut her off before she could speak. "No words can fix this. You brought this on yourself. You cheated, you lied, and now you're crying over him?" Daniel groaned again, trying to sit up. "You're crazy, man," he muttered. "I wasn't about to let him get away with it. You think you can sneak around with another man's wife and walk away like nothing happened?" I asked. "How does it feel now?" He was panicked now. His arrogance was gone. I turned back to my wife. "I hope it was worth it. Destroying our lives, our marriage, for him." She didn't answer. She just stared at me, wide-eyed and broken. I looked around the room, at the people who had been watching, whispering about me. "I know you've all been talking about this behind my back," I said. "You watched me walk around like a fool, while you laughed at my expense. Well, you're no better than them." Some people turned away, but no one spoke. I turned to leave. My wife scrambled to her feet, her voice shaking as she called out, "Please, I made a mistake. We can fix this. We can talk about it." I stopped, but didn't turn around. "After everything? You think there's anything left to fix?" She stepped toward Daniel, who was still groaning on the floor, but I pushed past her, walking out the door and into the cold night air. The anger still burned in my chest, hotter with every step I took. I reached my car, slammed the door, and sat there, gripping the steering wheel with trembling hands. My knuckles were white. My chest heaved. And for the first time, clarity hit me. I wasn't going to let her twist this. I wasn't going to let her play the victim. The next morning, I filed for divorce. She begged, pleaded, cried, but it was over. I moved on. And I learned something: respect isn't something you beg for. It's something that's earned. And if someone refuses to give it to you, it's better to walk away, no matter how much it hurts.